Our next unit is going to go into linear equations, and a big part of these linear equations is the slope of our line, the slope of our graph, or the information that we're looking at. So if x is the independent variable and y is a dependent variable, then the rate of change is a change in y over the change in x. So we look at how the graph moves up and down over how the graph goes left and right. And rate of change is just another way of saying slope. It's the same thing. So if we look at a graph, right, we also might say the change in y would be the rise, because we're going up and down, and the change in x is the run, going left and right. So your slope is always going to be rise over run, change in y over change in x. So one way of doing it is just looking at your graph. So we would go up 2 and then over 4. So in this case, my slope would be 2 over 4, which simplifies to 1/2. So the slope of this line up here would be 1/2. Right? It's important when you're looking at your graph to find points that are easily, you can tell that where they are on your graph. So like, for example, this one's at 2, 1. We wouldn't want to pick a point right here where we have to estimate. So try to find where it's kind of on your horizontal and vertical, like in a grid. Right? Or if you have the actual points, we can plug it in. This is our slope formula. Okay? One thing to keep in mind is that we label slope with an M. So my formula would be m equals y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. All right, now remember, subtraction, order matters. Okay, so if I start with a y up here, I have to start with that matching x down here. You don't have to necessarily put a specific point first, but your first point needs to be on top of each other, and then the same with your second point needs to be on top of each other. So whichever points you try to start with on top, you have to start with on the bottom. Okay, we have different types of slope. We have a positive slope where you're going uphill from left to right. You always read your graphs going left to right. So a positive slope means you're walking uphill. A negative slope means you're walking downhill. A slope of 0 means that you're going straight across. There is no rise. All right, and then an undefined slope means it's a vertical line. Okay, so now a couple things. If I have a slope of 0, that's when you have 0 on top, because 0 divided by anything is 0. So that means that you don't go up at all, you just keep going over. So your rise is 0, your run is some other number. Undefined slope is when you have a number on top and 0 on the bottom. So that means you go up however many, but then you don't go over left and right. So you go up and down, but not left and right. You cannot ever divide by 0. So your answer, your slope is not going to be 5 over 0, because that's wrong. Your slope is, you're going to actually write out undefined. So your slope will always have a number, right? An example of a positive slope, 2. An example of a negative slope, -1/2. And then a slope of 0, your slope is just 0. And then anytime you end up dividing by 0, you write undefined. All right, so using this table, I want to find the rate of change and explain the meaning of that rate of change. Well, I know my rate of change is going to be the change in y. So I have y2 minus y1 over the change in x, x2 minus x1. So I'm just going to pick an x1, x2, y1, y2 from my table. So if I use these, all right, here's my x's, here's my y's. So on top I can put 152 minus 76, and then on the bottom, because I started with 152, I've got to start with 4, because that's what matches the 152. 152 minus 76 is 76, 4 minus 2 is 2, and then I can simplify that to 38 over 1, or just 38. So my slope in this case, or my rate of change, is 38. Now whenever we're talking about the meaning, right, my table says that the time driving is my x and the distance traveled is my y. So if I just read it like my fraction, I have 38 miles for my distance per hour of driving, because it's 38 for 1 hour. So I can go 38 miles in 1 hour on average. That's my average rate of change in this scenario. Okay, for this one, I want to find the rates of change for 2002 to 4 and 2004 to 6. So if I start with 2002 to 4 and look at my points here, all right, I'm at 7, so 2002, 7, and then up here, 2004, and it's telling me it's 8.9. So those are my 2 points for the first one. So on top, I'm going to have 8.9 minus 7. I started with 8.9, so I got to start with 2004, and then I go to 2002. So 8.9 minus 7 is 1.9 over 2, and then 1.9 divided by 2 is 0.95. Right, so we have 0.95 as my slope, okay, or my rate of change. And then from 04 to 06, right, this point is 2006, and then it tells us 12.1. So on top we've got 12.1 minus 8.9, and then 2006 minus 2004. So 12.1 minus 8.9 gives us 3.2. And then 06 minus 04 is 2. And that simplifies to 1.6 is my rate of change. All right, and this is talking about the number of passports over the years. All right, other questions we'll have with slope is just finding the slope of 2 points. And that's going to come back to our slope formula, which we call slope M. And that's y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Alright, so up here, I've got my 2 points. If I start with my y up here at 2, it's going to be 2 minus 5. Because I started with this 2, I've got to start with the same x. So negative 3 minus 5. 2 minus 5 is negative 3. Negative 3 minus 5 is negative 8. I can't simplify 3 over 8, but if I have 2 negatives, that's a positive. So my slope is 3 over 8. And we're going to leave everything as an improper fraction. Alright, I got another example. So if I start with this y, so I have negative 8 minus a negative 4 over, got to start with a matching x, so negative 2 minus negative 3. I would always write it out, right? Because it's very easy to mess up on your negatives and positives if you don't see it. So don't do this in your head, write it out. 2 negatives make a positive, so I've got negative 8 plus 4, negative 2 plus 3. So negative 8 plus 4 is negative 4. Negative 2 plus 3 is 1. And so I can simplify and rewrite that as just negative 4. Alright, now I've got 2 more points. So I'm going to start with the 4 up here. So I've got 4 minus 4. And then I got to start with that same x. Negative 3 minus 4. 4 minus 4 is 0. Negative 3 minus 4 is negative 7. 0 divided by anything is 0. So remember, a slope of 0 is a horizontal line because I'm not rising at all. Alright, now I've got negative 2, negative 4, and this negative should be down here. Got a weird gap in there. Alright, so I'm going to start with a 3 down here. So we got 3 minus negative 4. And then got to start with that same x, so negative 2 minus negative 2. 3 minus a negative becomes 3 plus 4. Same thing, becomes negative 2 plus 2. 3 plus 4 is 7. Negative 2 plus 2 is 0. Uh-oh, cannot ever divide by 0, so my slope is undefined. And that just means that this is a vertical line. Right, some other types of questions. I've got the value of r, so that this 2 points, the line that goes through these 2 points, and my r is one of my coordinates, has a slope of 1/2. So if we think about it, my slope formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So I know my slope is 1/2, so I'm going to plug that in for m. Alright, and then over here, I'm going to plug in the values that I know. So if I start with that 2, I have 2 minus 3, got to start with the same x value, over r minus 6. Alright, and then I can simplify this a little more and say negative 1 over r minus 6. And you have different ways of solving this, but it is a fraction that equals a fraction, so one option is to cross multiply. 1 times r minus 6 is just r minus 6. 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. Add 6 to both sides. R equals 4. And same type of problem, but now I want to equal negative 5/8 and I want to find p. So again, my slope is, or my slope formula is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So if I start with the 4, I got 4 minus a negative 1. Got to start with the same x, so over p minus 3. And then this has to equal negative 5 over 8, because that's my slope. 4 minus a negative 1 becomes 4 plus 1. Alright, 4 plus 1 is 5. Again, I got another proportion, so one option for solving is to cross multiply. And I'm going to come over here, so 5 times 8 is 40. And then I got negative 5 times p minus 3, so I have to distribute that negative 5. Again, don't try to do everything in your head because it's easy. If you're trying to do it in your head, you might forget to multiply the negative 5 and negative 3. And now I have an equation to solve, so I'm going to subtract 15. So we get, not negative, a positive 25 equals negative 5p divided by negative 5. So p equals negative 5, which is supposed to be option B. And that is how you find the slope. The biggest thing, write it out. Don't try to do everything in your head because little mistakes will cost you in the long run because we're going to keep building on the slope. So make sure you write it out. Remember, whatever y you start with is the same x you have to start with. And then your double negative is going to make it a positive.